Okay,
Sure.
hello everybody. My name is Jim Porter. Welcome to my channel, Skeptical Spectrum, and this is the podcast called Change Jim Porter's Mind. I might change that title someday. Today, it's me and Dr. Eric Diamond. Is there anything you should tell everybody about yourself?
I'm a clinical psychologist in private practice in Gainesville, Florida, doing psychotherapy with adult men and women and couples. In addition, I'm the founder and director of the Gainesville Men's Center, offering men's groups and men's retreats.
Or how long has the Gainesville Men's Center been in business?
26 years, we're about to offer our 43rd weekend retreat,
Oh,
and the men's groups are ongoing now for 25 years.
and I have availed myself of a couple or more of those retreats, and they're wonderful. One thing I didn't tell you is that after I'm done, I put on a 30-minute timer to give us some shape and form and limits, you know.
Perfect.
Okay, so I don't know if Eric and I had a real disagreement a while back, but we had talked about, we have a mutual person we know that there was Eric gave an amazing image related. Oh no, it's something you typically say, but that helped this person understand that there is a point to getting out there and taking a chance on life, very broadly stating it. And so I gave this neurological thing that I had studied in a re-education, that's a terrible word, a CEU course, continuing education. Um, and so the conversation came up of which one could be more powerful to clients. So like Eric and I just talked before we came on, we don't necessarily think we're gonna have to strongly agree, but it makes for an interesting conversation. And I think it can make for more, for me, it's a mental exercise to understand people's concepts. They have to be a little bit different in every person, right? So
Absolutely.
Eric, you studied like a lot of psychodynamic theory, a lot of, and I guess psychodynamic is a broader version of, what is it? The big term that everybody knows about, psychoanalysis and all that stuff. Jung, Freud, and I don't know about Adler, but anyway, in general.
Dozens of followers.
Yeah, absolutely. So mine, I was doing the dry neurological thing one day. And so I'm going to explain that first, and then it's going to be my turn to understand everything about Eric's ways of helping people, visualize and feel pumped up to get better in a manner of speaking. Okay, so here goes. I'm going to go to my page. It might look like I'm reading, but that's because I am. So this is the argument for teaching biology to psychotherapy clients. Teaching biology and scientifically derived psychological constructs to psychotherapy clients is a great way to frame their future activities and efforts. It may be the best way. It gives them something that they can reasonably believe in. It gives them an accurate visual structure that can serve as a map to remember concepts and acting on them. It can also allow them to intuit their own solutions and activities. Only scientifically derived information can be really trusted as reliable and valid. That's a strong statement, but scientifically derived information and advice is self-corrective as long as psychotherapists stay rooted in the research or in research. Myth might paint a picture, but the picture may not be accurate, even if vivid and somewhat inspirational. Mythical images might feel helpful and intuitive, but not necessarily be better than biological images. Even classic psychological theories should stand up to scientific testing over years and years. But if a psychotherapist doesn't keep in touch with the science, this can't be verified and clients can't use that information in their lives. An example of a doubtful psychological concept is Freud's penis envy. I actually, in another training I was doing, I heard this concept. I haven't looked at the research for this, but Freud did not want to create a concept of penis envy as part of his published psychodynamic theory. He was pressured to do so because his community of colleagues demanded he remove his explanation of female neurosis that stated that it was derived from women being personally abused and societally oppressed. So he quickly invented penis envy to replace that, the way I understand it. Anyway, clients need to think critically about their own thoughts because not learning to doubt your own thoughts limits your potential progress. Doubting one's own thoughts is healthy for clients, but also for psychotherapists and everyone, I guess. Science is the gold standard method of checking our own beliefs. Discussing scientific findings and mimicking its method in session can teach clients to engage in self-corrective thinking. I suspect philosophical style debate uses reason, not necessarily systematic data analysis, to do a similar job. It is another way of learning to open up one's beliefs to being challenged. Much psychodynamic theory can be misinterpreted as affirming the supernatural. That may or may not be a problem, but I'm stating it like it's a problem. Modern clients often believe that their therapists are giving them the straight dope, the latest, most up-to-date science on what makes people tick. When a client hears psychodynamic or mythical metaphors without understanding to what level the metaphor represents a robustly validated reality, they may begin to think that there are supernatural forces affecting them that are not really affecting them. This isn't to say that psychodynamic concepts do not have current empirical validation. This is also not to say that we are to disabuse people of their deeply held community-supported religious convictions. But we certainly want clients to know that skepticism is important to effective thinking and action. They otherwise may not have the opportunity to choose to abandon poetic concepts and replace them with something that is a better guide to well-being. If it isn't true, it shouldn't be overly represented to be made out to be true. So anyway, biological explanations and empirically verified psychological constructs also serve as metaphor. They give images, they paint a picture. They are more like an accurate roadmap, and they may correspond better to client experiences that are felt in their bodies and seen in their cognitions. I'm going to use an example, and it's the polyvagal theory that I brought up the other day. It explains why we need to experience anxiety or anger to be able to experience other emotions, and it also explains why we need to reasonably safe and accepting human. We need to engage in we need reasonably safe and accepting human interactions in order to have healthy emotional regulation. So we need each other, and we need to be safe and secure with each other and continually, well, to some level, we always need human interactions to actually regulate ourselves neurologically. There are 3 branches of a nerve called the vagus nerve. So this is the beginning of my explanation. It comes out of the brain and down the spine and branches out in at least 3 places. I'll go from bottom to top. The dorsal branch pops out from around the lower back of your spine and attaches to organs to regulate your digestive system until something triggers it to make you drop, dissociate, freeze, flop, forget, etc. Because your life depends on that sometimes, like when there's no point in running or fighting, but there is a point in being invisible to a predator. It's associated with low motivation, lack of emotional experience, depression, etc. The vagal brake is another branch. It branches out to your cardiac region, your chest area, and in routine life situation keeps your heart rate from going too high. It turns off when it's time for your heart rate to go too high, because your life depends on that, like when it's a real good time to run. The ventral vagal branch branches out around the level of the base of the skull and handles all the social stuff going on in our faces and other places that start to connote safe, secure, social engagement and acceptance. It also primes us to pay attention to those and others, mostly unconsciously, because there's so much going on socially in every human interaction. This is not just important for seeking safety within a protective group. It's also where a lot of the most fun emotions reside, like the feelings of relaxation and the feelings of horniness, which is a good one to mention. To my knowledge, this is the most up-to-date, well-validated explanation of why we got to go through hell before we get to heaven, and why it's possible to get there. To go from numbness and depression to joy and love, you have to pass through anxiety and anger, and you have to risk engaging socially. And it's a journey. It's a physical journey inside of you, is why I like it. So that's my explanation and illustration of why scientific theory in the counseling room is as good as or better than myth and metaphor. And that's that, except for I have to turn on my timers so that we don't talk for 2 hours.
Which we could
We
easily
could.
on this. I made enough notes for a 2-hour lecture, I think.
I couldn't even
response.
see you because I was reading the paper, yeah.
Half hour will be good.
All right.
No problem.
Anything, I think.
Well, that was like an exhilarating ride on a roller coaster, a good roller coaster that had lots of different dips and turns and rides and went around in I enjoyed it.
Good.
Enjoyed you, I should say. If this was like a William Buckley type talk show, I might say you didn't prove your theory, but I'm not that's not the way how I'm going to go.
I've watched it a lot.
You had a lot of interesting ideas, a couple of straw man arguments, and I'm just going to
Yeah,
speak now. Will that work for you?
absolutely. And I'll ask questions if I don't understand something.
Okay. Our topic is the introduction of biological ideas. But not just ideas. I mean, we've got two levels here. We've got biological concepts brought into psychotherapy, and then we have biology itself. In other words, a psychosomatic or psychophysiological approach to therapy, which I'm involved with as a bioenergetic therapist. Nonetheless, let's go back to you had Freud in there. I'll go back to Freud.
Right.
Freud was a neurologist first and a researcher, and really wanted to put psychoanalysis and psychology on a scientific basis. This was his dream all the way through. And that urge to my talk will refer to numerous polarities: art versus science, literal versus figurative, cause versus mechanism, mechanistic versus mystical. There's many we're set up this way: yin and yang, Dionysus versus Apollo. Even the nervous system itself is set up into sympathetic, parasympathetic, or branches of the vagus nerve. So the psychology mirrors the biology in the sense of thesis, antithesis, and synthesis, two opposites and a synthesis. The wish to be scientific, for psychotherapy to be scientific as opposed to an art form, has been running from the very beginning with Freud. It certainly runs through the academic psychology and the research oriented. And in my opinion, biology gets pulled into this under the notion that biological is more scientific, more real than abstract concepts and psychological constructs, which can be interchangeable or ephemeral, right? The wish to make psychotherapy a scientific enterprise with evidence-based therapy and protocols and so on runs through as a current that's always running like electricity through the walls. Now, what is the basis of this is up for discussion. Is it possible that soft science people feel competitive with hard science people, and the phallic metaphor I'm using is intentional, as if the soft science people should be harder? Here I'm weaving the penis envy back in. And hard science equals good, and soft science is soft.
Mhm.
And hard science would be better.
So physical versus like you said, constructs. Yeah.
Well, there's no question that there's an appeal of hard science. That's one reason I did my dissertation research measuring heart rate and blood pressure, because I saw other people's research relating mush to mush, like self-esteem to need for approval or anxiety. And it's like, there's mush on both sides. I don't want mush. I want to get, at least I got a blood pressure reading on one side, and if it was physics, I could have them on both sides. Okay. So, however, here's the one point to make is that one definition of science is knowledge that is adequate to its subject. So, knowledge that is adequate, clearly, knowledge that would be adequate to poetry is different than knowledge adequate to physics. And knowledge in relation to psychotherapy is going to be almost infinite in scope, because it involves not only human beings who are, by definition, psychological, spiritual, biological, all at once, automatically, but the interaction between two people, which includes such things as consciousness and intersubjectivity and unconscious. So we do want a knowledge that is adequate to its subject matter, but whether that knowledge can be subsumed under the same scientific measurement and the same scientific processes as biology or physics or chemistry is, in my view, unlikely. And the more you try to import it, the more you're going to bang your head against it.
But let me make sure I heard that again. It's well, no, I think I thought of a question while you were saying, that's why I misheard it.
Sure.
Could you just encapsulate that again, that last 30 seconds?
So our field of psychology and psychotherapy can be studied scientifically, but the subject matter is so vastly different than hard science that you can't merely use the methods of hard science or use wishful thinking and just wish your way into our field being like a hard science, because it isn't.
Oh, okay. And are you saying that because there are constructs like anger is a construct or something like that, or...
Okay, I think I can answer your question by going to the next step, and I
Oh, yeah,
apologize for
absolutely.
talking too fast. A very important distinction, and it's very important for medical visits and other, is the distinction between a cause and a mechanism. They are frequently confused. Okay? A mechanism is merely that. In other words, if my heart isn't pumping well, fluid will back up and I'll have swelling and high blood pressure.
Okay.
Okay. Those are all the mechanisms. That does not address the question, why is the heart not pumping well in the first place? Right? Which could be anything from drug damage to heartbreak to genetics to who knows,
So is that...
over exercise, under exercise, right? In other words, the cause and the mechanism are not the same. And everything has a mechanism. In other words, in the human body, everything has got to run through some nerve fibers. A thought, a feeling, a reaction,
Mhm.
a need, a wish, you name it, is going to run through some nerve fibers. But those are mechanisms, and a mechanism is not the cause. It doesn't, while it's lovely to discover mechanisms, and people are using PET scans and CAT scans and MRIs and measuring everything you can measure, that's on the mechanism side. It doesn't tell us, why does this person have this stuff going on in their nervous system at this time, that's in the realm of cause.
Would you say
You understand?
cause is like if you're going to define or divide and define, cause is
Yes.
something external that originates externally?
Well, internally or externally. In other words, if I'm angry a lot, my amygdala may be overfiring. True. And it's nice to know that, but and I can tell someone you have an overactive amygdala. I don't think that that may be interesting information for them, but I don't think it makes anything more scientific or less. It simply gives the mechanism. Why is that person's amygdala overfiring? Could be because their dad beat them up as a kid, or because they get off on dominating people and get a payoff for being angry, or anger is a defense against their fear, or many other possibilities, right? Or they could have it, yes, genetically overactive. That would make it more
Sort of
hardcore
inflammatory.
biology. And we need biology. That's where medicine or biological psychiatry comes into play. And that would be so if a person had a tumor that was leading, or vascular dementia, which leads to aggression, now you've got all mechanism and no psychology, right? But that's why it's under the realm of medicine and not psychology, right? Because that's a physical on both ends, a physical cause and a physical manifestation, both.
That's okay. Yeah, I get that point. You wouldn't call that psychology. You would call that biology. Or
Right,
okay.
right. Psychology cannot be reduced to biology no matter how hard people try. But as I said, there's always mechanisms. So let me give an example of in Harville Hendrix imago theory for couples likes to talk about, we have a reptile brain, it's the brainstem that only registers safe or dangerous. That's all it does. We have a monkey brain, which is
Could you say that
fight.
again? Because the
The,
signal
the reptile brain only is the level of a lizard, only registers, am I safe or am I in danger? I gotta run. That's all it does. That's
that's down
cold
there in the
blood,
dorsal vagal area.
cold blooded like a lizard. The monkey brain is fight, flight, freeze, submit, feed, fornicate. That's the limbic system, or the midbrain. The cortex is like a computer, sort of, with language and reasoning and so on. And the owl brain is the neocortex, or the prefrontal cortex, which is the only part of the brain that can hold two opposing points of view simultaneously. Very important for relationships. So the husband can, one doesn't have to be right and the other wrong. They could both be right in a way, right? That's a 16th of an inch thick in the front of the brain, and it's not functioning in everybody. So this is extremely useful for understanding culture and understanding conflict and understanding where groups or people are developmentally and why it's so difficult for them to take anybody else seriously. And also for the reactions of our patients and ourselves inflicted by trauma and conflict. Now, whether it's useful for people to hear this mechanism, I put strictly under the heading of utility. I will use anything to help people. I don't really care if it's breathing or concepts or a pat on the back or a men's retreat or a model. A model can help reduce people's anxiety by giving a framework. And
Like
a
the Imago.
framework.
You mentioned
framework.
Imago and
Imago's a framework. They're all frameworks.
you went to biology, but
Yeah, that's a, but
briefly what the
interpersonally, I can't fix someone's amygdala or their cortex or their reptile
was,
brain.
I was going to
I
ask you to
can't,
quickly, like, if there's a 2-second way to do it, explain real quickly what Imago is.
Imago theory says that we have made a blueprint in our minds of our early caretakers and their interactions with us and with each other, like our parents' marriage, and that we gravitate and even fall in love with people that have some of the negative characteristics of our early caretakers.
Excellent. Okay, thank you. I just wanted to make sure. I
Yep,
couldn't have said it
100%.
that quickly. Yeah.
No problem.
Oh,
So
let me ask another
now,
clarification,
yeah,
if you don't mind. So
yes,
I think I'm hearing that like constructs that are not, physically really floating around anywhere. They're constructs. You separate you that's a different category than biological explanations. You do believe that they're at least explorable with scientific methods, I think. Do you? Like constructs like anger,
one
like imago and things like that?
depends what you mean by scientific. Scientific is knowledge adequate to its subject. So if we're trying to reduce the human being to mechanisms, that's called reductionistic or
Mhm.
mechanistic. I want to bring in
Yeah.
an extremely important distinction made by Wilhelm Reich.
Okay.
Wilhelm Reich, not disciple, but member of Freud's inner circle, really discussing sociology more so than psychology here, but or ways that human beings construe their world. Uh, Pointed out three channels you want to look at here. On one, imagine a road with a ditch on either side. The road is called being a functional thinking and a functional character, which is like health. A functional character assesses what's going on realistically and responds to it effectively. The two ditches are called the mechanistic and the mystical. The mechanistic would like to read, like Isaac Newton, would like to reduce everything to the world is a machine, the world is a computer, people are like computers, people are like machines. A lot of those metaphors, it's all parts interacting in some way. And once we understand the mechanisms, we're in good shape. That's called mechanistic thinking. It isn't always right. I mean, it's useful for mechanisms. In other words, if my car is broken, I want my mechanic, listen to the word, I want my mechanic to think mechanistically so he can fix my car. I don't want a dissertation on the beauties of automotive, flow. I want a mechanic to be mechanistic. The other road is the mystical, which is all kinds of abstraction and conceptualization, whether it's Marxism or abstract philosophy or the art of therapy or anything else is in the realm, or New Age. It's all in the realm of mysticism, that it's not about mechanisms, it's about unseen forces that you can't see. Astrology and crystals and uh, demons and angels. This is all mysticism. It has a great appeal to people. Just like mechanistic has a truth to it, mystical there is certainly more going on than meets the eye. Things happen, that amazing coincidences happen, things happen that we can't explain rationally, and that invites or invokes mysticism. Okay. But mechanistic can be used as a defense against being functional. And mystical is frequently used as a defense. I can't really deal with reality. I can only deal with abstract concepts. And this is the whole thing with conspiracy thinking and conspiracy
I didn't, I didn't quite
is
catch it.
mysticism.
Mechanism
Is
can be
my-
used as a defense against,
yeah, of course.
against what? I didn't know, I didn't hear the, or,
Well, in other words, if I'm a psychotherapy therapist or therapy researcher, and I want to say, look, we can't deal with this intersubjectivity and the unconscious and the unknown. We got to deal with what we can measure. This is the B.F. Skinner. You can only, and there's things you can measure. So we're going to measure which thoughts the person has, and we're going to tell them to have different thoughts.
like you
And this is,
operationalize abstract
and we're
things?
going to operationalize it, and it's going to
Okay.
be mechanistic. Okay. Mystical is, this is really a shamanic encounter between a shamanic healer and a person, and it's no one can really understand what's going on because it's magic, and somehow the magic happens or the magic doesn't happen, and we hope the magic happens.
And you painted
That
them
would
both
be,
as two different ditches, it sounds like.
yeah,
Yeah.
sure.
Okay.
Yeah. Right?
So that, I think that right there tells me, I think that you're saying you don't choose between them.
Well, you got to wake up. We want to have goals,
Yeah,
for
yeah,
being a growing person. To me, a person who grows toward a functional character, both the therapist and the client, right?
Mhm.
And functional includes what in psychology are called ego functions: reasoning, judgment, synthesis, awareness, uh, able to handle paradox. I mean, it's not mystical what it means to be a healthy person that can function well. I don't think it is, and it's not about mechanism, and it's not about mysticism either. How to get there is a huge subject that doesn't really fit the umbrella that you put out. Then you're into the realm of psychotherapeutic technique or method, and the very interesting discussions of how does therapy actually help people, which may not be what the therapist or therapist researcher thinks it is.
I I don't know if I understand that. Meaning, what is a therapist researcher?
Psychotherapy researcher that's in a college or university somewhere that's trying to study psychotherapy and how does it work,
Because they don't have a
right?
lot of one-to-one, or they don't have a lot of
And
clinical
well, I'm
experience.
saying, well, let's say, I'll make it very specific. There's tons of research under the heading of CBT now.
Oh,
So
yeah, yeah.
if there's an assumption, we're going to do CBT with people and see how it works. And let's say that people get better. Naturally, the researcher says, well, we did CBT, and CBT involves changing thoughts and replacing them with better thoughts. And the person got better because we re-challenged and replaced their thoughts. That is not automatically true. We don't know that. Maybe they got better because they said, oh, this was a nice guy or a nice woman that really listened to me and I felt understood. Or maybe they went to sessions and they thought, you know what, this therapy is a waste of time. I just really need to stop drinking and maybe my life would get better. And it spurred them into action. It had nothing to do with what was going on in the room.
Mhm.
Or maybe the therapist said something parenthetically, as people have said to me, you said something to me that changed my life. And I don't even remember what it was. I mean, it was a side comment
But we can't.
that they
No,
they
I mean, are you
picked
saying
up on. Yeah.
are you saying we can't get a decent idea, enough to provoke thought, like,
No, there is mountains of research on psychotherapy outcomes and process. And I can't summarize it here, but I can say for sure that the different methods, so to speak, all help.
Oh, yeah,
And
the dodo
that
bird
not,
verdict.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. And non-specific, what they used to call non-specific factors, such as the therapist's personality, experience,
Looks,
presence,
my looks. Just kidding.
yeah, all of that comes into play very strongly. That's research proven. Research
Yeah,
proven,
yeah.
right?
That's what I mean.
So
That's what I was.
those are some of the conclusions. And what I said a few minutes ago, that if we dig into what really helped people, it's not automatically the therapist's theory about what's going on.
Oh, yeah. Okay. That does make
Not
sense.
automatically. It might be,
Well,
but it's not automatically.
once you said the theories and orientations are there for the therapist, not for the client necessarily.
And I want to, yes, I wouldn't feel complete if I didn't
Yeah.
mention, I loved, Freud. First of all, Freud to psychoanalysis and psychoanalytic therapy is like Benjamin Franklin to the history of America. I mean, it's a great start, but a lot has happened ever since
Yeah,
then. So when you go to the root, it's fine, but it's intellectually dishonest to think
yeah.
that
You know how
covers
I
the
did.
term.
I just
Yeah,
typed it because I was
yeah,
typing.
but I'm saying this for listeners, not for
Oh,
you.
absolutely.
Freud made an extremely important distinction that's now been forgotten for some strange reason between his psychology and his meta psychology. The psychology is the nuts and bolts. And Freud, in a way, was kind of like Lewis and Clark, the first ones that weren't Indian to see the West. When you get there first, you're like, whoa, look at this, the Rocky Mountains. I mean, they got big mountains out here, guys. So Freud got there first, and he discovered, hey, patients make distortions of their relationship with you. Hey, patients block out saying certain things because it makes them anxious. Hey, people have defenses against what's going on emotionally. Okay, that's the psychology. You could quibble with it, but it's fundamentally rock solid.
It
In other
stands
words,
up.
these things are so elemental to what goes on that they're indisputable. I mean, this is real.
They keep
Anxiety,
popping up no
defense,
matter what.
repression, transference, uh, dreams as a communication, et cetera, et cetera. Okay, now the meta psychology are speculations about what might be going on with the psychology, and they're labeled as speculations. Okay, so anything to do with death instinct, id, ego, superego, all kinds of other constructs and concepts, penis envy. This is the meta psychology. Okay, the meta psychology are openly stated as speculations, and other people were and are free to speculate otherwise. One of the flaws of Freud was a tendency to overgeneralize from a single case. So,
Oh,
for example, the famous case of Schreiber, who was a paranoid guy, and Freud drilled down to homosexual panic and homosexual fears. And then, therefore, Freud wrote about homosexual fears as the basis of paranoia. Okay, that was
I didn't realize that.
not the best scientific reasoning, because it doesn't, just because it might have been true of Schreiber does not mean that the next person with paranoia has the same root.
Yeah.
You see what I'm saying?
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
that was not kosher scientifically, right? It doesn't mean it's automatically wrong, but it doesn't mean you
Yeah.
got to watch out from generalizing from
Tiny
a
little.
single
Yeah.
case, right? Okay. So sometimes biology is brought in my opinion, brought into therapy as a shame reducer. In other words, the person feels bad, they're screwing their life up, and we're saying, hey, don't worry, it's
You're human.
pathways and molecules. You didn't do it, the molecules did it. Okay, that I wouldn't call that scientific, I would call it a shame reduction. Biology can also be brought in as a metaphor or a framework, as I said earlier, owl brain, cortex, monkey brain, reptile brain. I'm not treating the person's brain, but I am giving them a way of saying, hey, when you feel threatened or blamed by your partner, your monkey brain is getting set off. You're doing fight, flight, freeze, submit. It's not your fault. You're wired to do it, but we got to bring in your higher brain functioning here, or you're going to still have screaming matches with your partner, and it's going to be a mess. Okay, I think that can be helpful. I don't see it as I see that as functional, not even mechanistic. It's alluding to a mechanism, but it's basically working as a functional support for the person's ego to conceptualize what is happening in their life. I don't, as you can probably tell, I don't participate much in the fantasy that everything is going to become scientific. I think that cause and mechanism are frequently confused, just like causation and correlation are confused a lot. And that when people think they found a mechanism, they found a cause, and that is not the case.
I thought you would have said it reverse. So when somebody thinks they found the mechanism, they may have found the cause. How do you differentiate?
They have not found the cause.
Oh, I thought you said that somebody.
No.
Okay. You're saying when somebody thinks
they have found the
cause.
mechanism. That they have found the mechanism. That's all.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, the vagal. I like the vagal nerve, but in my world, my little window on this massive field, we're helping. There's a huge emphasis in the field now on helping people down regulate the sympathetic nervous system, which is overfiring due to trauma, fear, anxiety. It's overfiring. So to down regulate is to contact some kind of inner peace, some kind of parasympathetic upregulation of the parasympathetic, down regulation of the sympathetic, which is enormously helpful to people with PTSD and enormously helpful in general. And if the therapist feels like explaining that to people and laying out the pipes and that's okay. But either way, what's going to be helpful is the person being able to actually enter into those states of down regulation and go, whoa, I haven't felt this safe since I was 4 years old when the screaming started in my house, or since I got back from Vietnam. That's a beautiful thing. And when they can learn to access it themselves, they will have a sense of self-efficacy and have their hands on the wheel instead of getting kicked around by their own biology and kicked around by life.
Yeah, that makes sense to me. I think if I were I almost feel like your intro may have been a little bit of a summary. Like you said, even before we turned on the recording, you said you're not sure it's a disagreement.
I didn't know. I still don't know. Still don't know if I did agree.
Well, right, exactly.
I think I took issue with some points.
Yeah, of
use
course.
them as a springboard.
And for them and for the audience, you know that I'm not totally clear. That's why I write. That's why I debate, but you said you bring in anything that might help. Generally, that's what it seemed like part of your thesis was, that, yeah, I mean, if somebody gets something out of owl brain versus monkey mind, then great. And if I mention neural branching and that does something, whatever, if I have to use a car metaphor or a road metaphor or whatever, I think what I'm hearing is you're fine with it. As long, and also people need to do something. They need to, there's an experiential part of course, or maybe
It's got to
not
be
part.
a changed experience.
Mhm. Yeah, it's like trying to tell somebody how to,
Creating an experience. The experience in turn will run through various mechanisms.
and so it's sort of the difference between reading about juggling and practicing juggling.
Right, exactly.
Oh, okay. All right. Well, at least it's funny, to tell the truth. When I'm listening to someone, my mind is branching off trying to figure out if I understand what they're saying, but old habits of do I agree or disagree keep popping in.
Well, I certainly want to say, Jim, to you and to anyone who may consume this, I chose to offer quite a dense package of ideas and concepts at high speed, even worse, because of the time constraint.
Yeah.
And if I had an hour and a half, I would have left a lot of more breathing room and more explication. So
Yeah.
I gave a dense
Sure.
package
Yeah.
with many pieces of a pie. And I can only hope that the overwhelmed listener will either call me or write to me, which anyone is welcome to do, should they want to go further. And I take responsibility for, I don't believe that anyone could truly integrate what I just said at the
30 minutes.
speed in which I
No,
said it.
absolutely not.
And
Anybody who wants
I want to take responsibility. I don't have that illusion.
anybody who wants to contact either one of us, you're a Gainesville, Florida therapist or a psychologist. Easy to look you up, and there's a phone number there. And I don't know if your email's on. I don't even know if you want your email out there. But anyway, is your email online or whatever? That doesn't matter.
Sure.
Okay, because like you might get people.
EricDPhD@gmail.com.
You might get people from the UK emailing you. Are you that good at looking at your email? I'm terrible at looking at my email.
Yeah, I have to. I get different patient. Yes, I use it for work.
Well, okay. Yeah, so that's why I put a timer in there, because we could be having this, oh, this was too fast and too short. We could have said the same thing even if we gave it 2 hours. So, it's just the 30 minutes is just setting a limit. And what I did was I just kept going because I knew that you would know when you were kind of done for today.
Yeah, I felt complete, and I went down my own notes.
All right.
And I want to thank you for the opportunity to clarify my own thinking.
Yeah, appreciate it, because it helped me clarify not only my thinking, but also yours. So I know what I'm hearing you trying to say. I think I gathered a good idea of what you're communicating and how you think about it. But you're right. We could, one of these days, I'm going to create a formal debate thing where we would go back and forth and that sort of thing. So, and it'd have to have structure enough to make it doable and respectful and all that. But first, I just want to get much better at hearing what other people are trying to tell me. So appreciate you being willing to try to tell me. Thank you, Eric. And I'm going to stop the recording.